actually kept him from going to jail, probably getting burned at the stake, if you're familiar with what the church used to do to some very enlightened folks, like Bruno. What was Bruno's other name? I can't think of it. He was. I will check. Giordano Bruno, and it burned in the Campo de Flor, the Field of Flowers in Rome, which is like, there's actually a plaque there where the stake was. So if you're visiting Rome and you visit the Campo de Fiorenza, right? Florence. I don't know where we get the way we pronounce it. But in any case, you can find the plaque that they have that says where Bruno was toasted, right there in that spot. And why was he toasted? He thought the stars were the same size as the sun. It's just that they were so far away. And that was just so heretical that they had to burn him to death for thinking that. I'm still Roman Catholic. Officially, I suppose. So yeah, they burned people at the stake back then, thinking that was a terrific way of demonstrating to other people how stupid it was to be stupid. Especially when you were actually right. And we're probably familiar with another individual that got in trouble, Galileo. Yes, everyone's familiar with Galileo. Descartes, who's going to be our main topic today, never met Galileo. Thomas Hobbes, who we'll also probably talk about a little bit today, but more on Wednesday. Thomas Hobbes physically met Galileo, besides writing back and forth to them. And my quiz question for you actually today is, who was more influenced by Galileo, Descartes or Thomas Hobbes? Sounds fun? It could be either one. It's a personal opinion question, just like I think most of my quiz questions. Right? Who was more influenced? And why was Galileo so influential? Descartes was writing a book that was on the movements of the Earth and the Moon. And when he heard about the problem that Galileo experienced, he ended up trashing that book. Might have been parts of it got into some of his other works, but he decided not to publish that one because he didn't want to have the same kind of problem that Galileo had, where Galileo was told not to publish any more of the stuff about this heliocentric system. Right? And by the way, he did. Actually, he started the book off. We should have the entire thing on the web here somewhere. Well, in any case, this book is the one that came out after he was forbidden to publish any more on it. It was published in the Netherlands, and it included an introduction by Galileo where he explained that this book is being published without my approval. So you see, it wasn't his fault that book was published, but it said so right in the book. So he wasn't punished for that book because, of course, it wasn't his fault. It was published. He was told not to publish, and since it was, but you could see right at the start he had nothing to do with it. So there. But he was nonetheless forced to stay in his house and not leave it. What do we call that? Apartment living? I don't know. There's a name for that. Home arrest, house arrest, apartment arrest, which, by the way, today it's a museum with all of the different scientific implements that he was using. By the way, another problem that Galileo, he didn't invent the telescope. That was invented by a glass maker, a lens maker in, I think, the Netherlands. But Galileo read about it and decided he would try to make his own, and he made several instruments which are there at the museum where you can see them. And he ground the lenses himself, put the tubes together, and so on, and then used them to stare at the sun. So please, if you have a telescope, you don't even need a telescope to realize this is an issue. Don't stare at the sun. Not a good idea. My daughter just a couple of years ago pointed out to me too that the sunglasses I were using, cheap sunglasses, because I'm cheap. My mother, always used coupons. 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 It means a blow in French. Coupon, right? But in English we use we cut them out and you take them to the stick. Now you use your super duper califragilisticexpialidocious telephone type thing. You can just go bloop, or it's automatic, right? If you're at Freddy's, and you get discounts off of the prices of things, coupons. So I'm cheap, and my daughter pointed out, hey, don't use your sunglasses, get ones that are polarized. Because otherwise, if you just use darker lenses, what happens is your eyes open more and let in more of the rays from the sun to burn out your retina. So be careful, just use polarized sunglasses. So now I have a pair of polarized. But Galileo just did himself in. He was blind, and I have absolutely no doubt why he ended up being blind. Because when his eyes started getting too watery to look with the one lens, at the sun, he switched to the other one, make sure both of them were burned out. Plus, when the cardinals would all use his telescopes to look at the sun or the moon, as he said that the moon had bumpy things on it, it wasn't perfectly smooth. The theory was anything up in the heavens closer to God, and so therefore were perfect. So that's why everything was thought to be circular. The orbits were supposed to be circular, everything was circular. But once you got up as high as the moon, it should be perfect. Well, it turned out that when you look at the moon, by the way, looking at the moon even from right here on the ground at night, you can see craters and stuff, right? And even like that, footprints, can you see the footprints from here? Wouldn't you think you could see the footprint from here? Did you see the article the other day? Proof that the moon landing didn't happen because the sole of the boot was smooth, and if you look at the tracks, I don't know. Is that fake news? I don't know. But one of these days, someone will, have a little monument there. Here's the footprints. Don't walk on them. Don't screw them up. Because they're still there, right? But obviously, the moon is not perfect. As Galileo pointed that out, and of course, the cardinals looking through the telescopes, trying to see what he was talking about, had trouble. And we now know that part of the reason they had trouble was because Galileo's eyesight was a little screwed up, and he made the lenses for him. And so when others looked through his telescopes, they couldn't see what he was seeing through them, unless their eyes had the same defect as his did. interesting issues, all sorts of interesting things. I think I mentioned earlier that my favorite book on Galileo that I've seen is I spell his name right. Lots of different places to find it. But that's absolutely fascinating book. By the way, it has lots of detailed interaction between him and Pope Urban, who was actually one of his friends from years ago. And they knew one another. And basically, Urban was trying to encourage Galileo not to stir up a hornet's nest by saying that the Earth was not the center of the universe, but that the sun was, because it would just bother people, would get everybody all upset. And of course, it's a matter of perspective, which system you're going to look at. Remember my very second quiz, I think, was, does the Earth go around the sun? Does the sun go around the Earth? Trick question. There's lots of different models, all of which are useful, and therefore we say true. And they are in conflict with one another. You have to pick the context. What use are you making of this particular model? Remember the model-dependent reality theory that we see with Stephen Hawking and his co-writer, who I can't think of right now, begins with an L and is Russian. But okay, so if you like reading, have a chance to read this book. It's available all over the place. And notice that Galileo comes out looking like the more idiotic of the two. He was basically a fundamentalist. This is what I see. This is my perspective. It must be the truth. And the Pope's position was, well, it's true, but I mean, so is, the Earth-centered point of view if your perspective is, from here. And if you step away from the Earth and you think of the Earth as part of the solar system, you're going to have to be off the Earth to see that point of view, that perspective, right? And then if you want to see the sun going around the center of the galaxy, you have to step back from the solar system and see it traveling. And if you're going to think in terms of Brian Greene and the frozen river with all time and space existing at once, then the impression that anything is moving is an illusion of consciousness. Our DVD player playing the DVD. How many other models are there? Some say an infinite possible number of models. Same thing with mathematics. When we think about mathematics, I think we already mentioned that Descartes was really more famous in his own day as a mathematician than as a philosopher, per se. And that was because of what eventually would be named in his honor, the Cartesian coordinate system. How we do those different graphs and everything we invented to map a fly on a ceiling. But nonetheless, still, that became useful for all sorts of things, including artillery. How do you target an enemy that's on a particular hill height at a particular distance, etc. If you see the Monty Python shooting the cannon, they light it and the cannon flips over and blows up, in that direction. But actually, if you want to hit something with a cannon, you need to do math. And they didn't have that kind of math yet. It had to be invented, and Descartes invented a math that would help the artillery do that. So you're drawing arcs and things. And by the way, that's what killed him also, because he was invited to Sweden by Queen Christina, who wanted to learn how to draw all of these, shapes and everything. So he spent time at 5 a.m, getting up early in cold, dark Sweden to teach Queen Christina how to do these things. And of course, he was one of those people that loved sleeping late. And so he caught pneumonia and died. And everybody still today blames it on Queen Christina, who, by the way, she's absolutely fascinating. If you're curious about someone, did I spell that right?